Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ability Bridge podcast. We help teachers and parents find the support they need to guide students with diverse needs towards success. As always, Lynn and I are here together to chat things through. We're going to be talking a bit about social stories and sensory diets again today. Lynn, how are you today?
I'm all right. Yes, it is September. So as you can imagine, it's very busy. We're back in schools, which, you know, for me and my teacher team, we absolutely love that. Getting to meet the children again. It's great fun.
Great. And is it crazy bonkers busy?
Yes. Yeah. You know, even this week, we've had another 3 schools get in touch with us because, you know, people want to help their autistic children, which is really encouraging.
That's awesome. So we're going to dive straight into it. Lots to say, lots to chat through. We're gearing up to a couple of workshops that are coming in October, one on social stories, one on sensory diet. So we're going to chat a little bit about that. But to kick us off, Lynn, what is the difference? This is off the back of something we said in the previous episode around good and bad social stories, which we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into. But what's the difference between a social story that explains and a social story that demands? Yeah, as I said, that it is one of my bugbears because there's so many things, you know, so many plans and education plans that says, oh, use social stories. But people think that they're a kind of thing for demanding compliance. And in that way, I get emails quite regularly saying, how can I get a child to be able to? Or have you got a social story to make a child do this? And I always say, no, because that's about demanding compliance and that's not what they're for. There's a lot of connections between, you know, making a child do something and blindly and actually their vulnerability. I think that's what worries me most of all. So there's a phrase that's often used in social stories, which I hate, which is, if I do this, I will please my teacher or my parent or wherever. And if you think that through to the rest of their lives, you're actually teaching a child that you know, they've got to please others. And if somebody's asking them to do something that's wrong or you know, hurting them or abusing them, then actually they can use that against them. So it really worries me that phrase, and I used to say, ban it. So it's just about compliance, that, isn't it? Yeah. It's nothing other than compliance.
And autistic people are much more at risk of being taken advantage of being bullied and you know, being exploited, because they can take things quite literally. So when we write a story, we've got to be really careful. We write them. Every single word has to be chosen really carefully. So that's compliance. But actually, a social story is a wonderful tool to explain something really well in a way that they get it. So it invites understanding, it gives choices for them, it shows them how they can be safe in relationships, in social situations, life experiences, encouraging them to try something new. There's lots of opportunities you can do, as well as teaching them something.
So are you able to give us some examples of ones that, I mean, let's get the bad out of the way. Some that maybe have not been so helpful.
Yeah. Well, one issue that often comes up with children is saying sorry. So I have permission to share this story that was written by a teaching assistant a few years ago. And after she'd done training with me, she said, oh, I want you to keep these ones that I've written. I know they're bad, but you can use them to show people as examples. So I really bless her for that. And thank you. But it was called Say Sorry. So guess what it's about?
Okay.
Okay. So use the fact that the child likes Mario. So she's got a picture of Mario on the front, but on the second page it says, we always say sorry. Okay, so think about taking that very literally. The second page says, sorry if I hurt someone, I say sorry. If I am naughty, I say sorry.
Wow.
Okay. The next page is, if I am unkind, I say sorry. If I have unkind hands or feet, I say sorry. So there's a whole list of misdemeanors the child has done here. The next page, I need to have kind hands and feet and not hurt mummy. If I do, I need to say sorry. Now this is the killer page, the next page. Mummy does not like to get hurt. It makes her feel very sad. She will still love you, but you need to say sorry.
Oh my gosh. So, did you know, right, I'm going to jump in then because I know where you're going to go with this, but I'm obviously we have 2 children with diverse needs, but I'm still very much a rookie in terms of some of the skills. Yeah. So listening to that, some of it kind of makes me flinch because of lived experience, but I can listen to you say that and think, actually, it's really easy to think that somebody's done a really good job of that. Do you know what I mean? Because you go, actually, there's some positive reinforcement in there. There's some, she's trying hard to make it adapt to the child, to the young person. What specifically is such a nightmare with it? Such a nightmare.
One of the things, specifically for autistic children, is taking things literally. So we've used very language that is very absolute here, like we always say sorry. So when we're writing social stories, we use words like usually or sometimes, because an always is like, well, I'm sorry, but that's not a true statement, is it?
No.
We don't
and
always.
An autistic person would take that to mean I basically just spend all day saying sorry. Is that how that would
do? Or they could just think, well, I can't do that, so what's the point of this story?
Okay, got you.
Also, the rest is also, it's all about the misdemeanors that the child has done, like if I am unkind or if I have unkind hands. It doesn't say that, at some point everybody does these things. And one of the things we try and be very careful of is when we talk about negative things, is actually not even mention them at all, if we can, and actually talk about the situation as if those things are not happening. But also, most importantly, understand why they're happening. I mean, if he says, if I'm pushing somebody, there might be a very good reason why they're pushing somebody. They could have real sensory sensitivities, and somebody being near them actually terrifies them. And actually pushing them is their communication to say, I can't cope with you being near me. Yeah.
So we need to step back from that to take a bit more of a wide lens look at what's actually going on.
Yeah. It's why I like training people to write them, because we start with working out what the child's perspective is and we build up from that.
And is it pretty easy for us to learn the skills to do that?
I think if you follow the rules,
certain things we need to consider.
Yeah. I mean,
so then flip
for a long time, but I think there's a formula to follow, which is really useful.
Some principles, some rules to follow to make it so that you're not going to cause hopefully a disaster. So try maybe flip it then a little bit. Do you have some examples of social stories that have helped children and why they help those children?
So when we rewrote that story, what we wrote was an explanation of what sorry is. So we said sorry is a word that people use to acknowledge that there's been something gone wrong, and they may have had a part in it.
Okay.
Yeah. It might not have used those words exactly, but that's the kind of thing. It's like, this is what sorry is. And if you get in a situation where maybe because again, we work with a child to figure out what might have been going wrong. And sometimes he was just tired and sometimes a bit forgetful. Sometimes people getting in the way. So we said, these things happen. That's life. It's okay. Other people do them too. Sorry is a word that's used to try and repair those things. So you can say sorry, and that might help.
Okay.
And that was really, so the choice is there at the end. It's not saying you have to. It said, this is something you can do. And this is generally, when you hear sorry, what's going on.
Awesome. That's great.
It's not easy sometimes. I once had to write one about what sarcasm was. That was hard. Because sometimes it's not, how to recognize
something that's hard to understand, isn't it? Yeah. For any of us sometimes, but that is something that specifically they'll struggle with potentially.
Yeah. On the course, I try and get people to have a go at writing something themselves, which is why, it's a lovely workshop to do. And I always say, pick something easy to start with. Because that makes it, that helps.
Okay. So we will give you all the details of those that are coming up, the workshops that are coming up, but that is one of the focuses of one of the workshops we're running in October, isn't it, Lynn? Are you able to tell us a little bit about what we'll cover in that?
Yeah, so Carol Gray is the inventor of social stories, and I recently updated my own training with her. And that she has some rules to follow. But first of all, it starts with really understanding what's going on for the child, their perspective, which is really good autism practice. And then we write the story from that information. So that the child can learn something positive, and they have some very constructive and understandable things that they can do about this situation that we're writing about. So I'm going to teach people all the format and the rules, and there's resources with it so that they can go back to it afterwards. And then we have a little practice together of writing some of the sentences, using some of the keywords. I'll give you a list of words that are really good to use and ones to avoid. As also, it teaches you that if you get one downloaded off the internet, for example, you know how to personalize it, you know whether it's a good one or a bad one. So it's giving people all that kind of ability to, if they want to use them well.
That's awesome. So that's happening on October 17th. That's all the details are available at theabilitybridge.com. So that'll be fantastic. I'm just thinking about, I know we've talked about this before, but when we relocated from the UK to Canada a year or so ago, Lynn very kindly helped us put together a little package of resources, basically a social story for us to help Aaron understand what the journey was going to be like. So Aaron's now 10. He has Down syndrome. We're just, I don't know if you even know this, Lynn, we just started the process. He's having autism assessments as well at the moment. So that's kind of been flagged up as well now. So we're just working through all of that. But that was a huge help for him because there was just a very simple visual cue for what was happening now, what was happening next, just to kind of help. You can imagine the whole relocate, going so far and landing in a new place was going to be such a huge thing for him. And, just as it was for Sam. Sam's older, so we were able to chat things through a lot more. But for Aaron, it was a huge help and a big reassurance for him. So we have seen firsthand how powerful they can be.
Can I say something about that as well with older children? Because actually I use them a lot with teenagers, but I don't always write them as a story, and we don't always call them stories either because that sounds a bit babyish. But if you learn the language and the format, you can actually have conversations in the same structure. So you can talk about, what's happening, why it's happening, and what options they've got. And a friend of mine has had an autistic daughter at university, and I think it was Oxford University or something, very clever girl, that she was ringing home, having real struggles of things. And he was able to talk through it with it in that social story format.
Wow.
So they're really useful in lots of ways for many different ages and abilities.
Which is really powerful. So that workshop is October 17th. That's going to be it is a really popular one. So hopefully, folks, you can join us for that. Should we chat a little bit about sensory diets? And we're going to focus just a little bit on what equipment we would need for a sensory diet. Are you able to chat us through that, Lynn?
Yeah, so this is something that we try and build in our programs for children in school, so that in school that each child can have their own personalised sensory diet. And it sounds quite overwhelming as a teacher, I think, to think, oh, I've got to do all this on top of everything else. But actually, they're often self-organising. So there's some things that you can build in that are there for the child to access. And using the other staff in your class. But also if you've got that link with home and the diet carries on through, we'll explain on the course a little bit more detail. And I've said before, a diet, we call it a diet because it's just like having regular food meals that you would have through a day to keep your energy levels going. The sensory activities do the same. So we're going to look at 3 areas. One is calming activities. We're going to look at organising activities, so those that help a chaotic brain come back together, really. It's not just like organising what you're going to do, but organising your sensory systems. And then the third area is alerting. So all of us feel a bit tired, a bit sluggish sometimes, and sometimes we might just need something that just brings our attention back to what we're doing. So all those things, and very simple things that you can use around your house, anything from having a bath to a nice blanket to wrap in. So blankets are good. In the calming stuff, we look at a lot of things that are using deep pressure. So that's into your muscles and your joints, so that you can feel that in your body. Those are very calming things. So some children like sort of having cushions piled on top of them, because that's, giving them that deep pressure. And lots of things like weighted things. Now, weighted blankets are a big thing at the moment. But you've got to be careful with them. So we're going to look at what you have to be careful with. But sometimes you can just have a backpack with some books in. That can be really grounding for a child walking around. So if you're taking them to the shops or you're walking to school, that extra weight just helps them know where their body is. So we're going to share lots of little tips, practical things like that you can actually do with everyday things without having to spend a lot of money. And then we'll think, because it's like October, isn't it, that we're doing it, we can think of some ideas that you can ask on your Christmas list, I think.
That's awesome. So, and this is all because our autistic children, our autistic students, regulating, helping them cope with life might need specific approaches. Is that why we're talking about it? Yeah,
because now sensory processing is part of the diagnostic criteria for autism. Sadly, people can't really access the assessment as well as they should be able to. But what we know is, for many autistic people, the way they experience the world and process the world is through these sensory messages and processing. So some people get too much and it gets chaotic and overwhelming, but some people also get not enough, and so they need kind of that boost to understand it. It's also very common in ADHD and other conditions as well, the sensory processing difficulties. So, as you know, I've said I've got ADHD. I do struggle to sit still, and if I have to sit still for very long, my body fizzes. I can't explain it any other way, and I have to move. I have to go and do something. So it's quite interesting to see. I might talk about both those conditions as we do the workshop.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting. I know from our point of view, Sam in particular, so he's almost 18 and he's autistic. And particularly if he's had a hard day for whatever reason, it can just be that it's one of those days, it doesn't have to be anything specific. He's just had a harder day. We know that, we might say, Sam, it might be a good idea for you to head outside and kick the living daylights out of that taekwondo punch bag thing you've got going on out there. And he can go at it. He's just about to get his black belt. He can go at it, and it makes a huge difference for him to have that outlet from burning off some. We all need to burn off some steam, but he really needs to burn off some steam sometimes. But he also finds it really helpful, depending on what's going on, to sit in front of the PlayStation for an hour or 2 hours, because it just seems to, sure what the word is, kind of empty his brain from download everything from the day without him. He's almost on autopilot on the PlayStation. And it just helps take the edge off things for him. Does that relate to this? Am I in the right realm?
Yeah, and I think that's really important to not make our kind of PlayStations and Xboxes like the enemy, because they're not. They can be so helpful in so many ways. We do worry, obviously, if a child has only got that, the other outlets of things. So yeah, we'll explore, I think, what possibilities parents can explore, depending on obviously budgets and places available in where you live, because everybody's got different places to live. If you live in a concrete jungle, you can't really go out into the woods, for example. So it's kind of like finding things that you can in your local area and things that are safe for your child. And I think the other thing is as well is that all of us as people, as human beings, have sensory systems that all work differently. Some people get annoyed with like certain noises or don't like crowds. I think it's just ramped up to an nth degree, perhaps, with autistic people. They're far more sensitive. and need this. And a sensory diet just gives them those little bits of breaks throughout the day to help regulate and calm things down to a place where then they can cope with the next set of demands we're going to put on them.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. That'll be so helpful. And I think these two workshops relate to each other. So based on what you were saying before about, with teenagers, how you can have a conversation with them and talking about options and helping us deal with a certain situation. I guess the structure of how you have that conversation aligned with your plans for sensory diets can actually be really powerful when you bring them together.
Yeah, and as a child gets older, the more they can understand about their own sensory systems, and so therefore know what options make them feel better, then actually they get more braver and be able to ask for things or advocate for themselves, but also seek those things out so that they become able to, well, this is my system, this is my body, therefore if I do that, that will change that. And we try and help them understand. I had a great session last year with some year 10 and 11 girls in a high school, and they were very anxious about their exams and so forth. And we did a good couple of sessions on the sensory systems and how it relates to how they were feeling anxiety. And all of them were able to bring in new strategies for coping with the exam stress. And
awesome.
My feedback is they all did okay as well.
Hooray. That's amazing. Thank you, Lynn. So good. So much to go at. And these two workshops, so the sensory diet one is going to be October 13th. So actually that's earlier than the social stories one. All the details will be alongside, however you're watching this or listening to this on the podcast or on YouTube or whatever. All the details will be in emails or however you've got hold of this. So we'll make sure you've got everything you need on that. Just to say that each of those comes at a small price, but for members, they're getting it right, members, which is starting at just £12 a month, you get access to all of these workshops as part of your membership. So if you're kind of thinking about how you want to dive in, that's a really good way to do that. We're very much about wanting to support everybody who's caring for or working with a child or young person with diverse needs. We're very much about the relationships between everybody who's involved in that, because everybody wins when those relationships are thriving. And Lynn, in our next episode, we're going to talk a little bit about, obviously we're just in the new school year, and there's lots to talk about with the relationships between home and school, and some of the strategies we can employ and some of the tactics we can roll out to make sure those relationships are as strong as they can be. Any initial thoughts on that before we say farewell?
Yeah, I think it's pivotal really for schools and parents to get that relationship together right. And I think us talking together, for you from the parent side and me from the school side, I just think we can bring a lot of really good advice and practical ideas to everybody, because we know it's a struggle from both sides of things, don't we?
Yeah, we do. I think we do. We're practicing some stuff here this year, which is, some stuff we learned last year. We're trying to carry over some stuff, and big thing is nobody's ever going to get it 100% right all the time, and looking after each other is really important. So we're going to be, as I say, diving deeper into that next time. But for now, Lynn, as always, thank you so much for your time today. Love hanging out with you and chatting. And everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Head over to theabilitybridge.com, check out those workshops. And again, if you want to go deeper, then the memberships is the best place to go. But make sure you're certainly signed up to receive emails and updates on our monthly podcast and our email updates as well. Thanks so much for joining us today.